3 blood moons appeared over Earth in 18 months. 2 fell on the exact same Jewish holy day. 2,500 years ago, a Hebrew prophet warned this would happen before the world changed forever. Right now, as you watch this, the heavens are displaying signs that biblical scholars have waited millennia to witness. On March 14, 2025, millions across North America watched the sky turn crimson. The moon, Earth's constant companion for 4.5 billion years, transformed into a blood-red orb for 82 minutes. But here's what made this different from every other lunar eclipse in recorded history. It occurred on Purim, the Jewish festival celebrating Israel's deliverance from annihilation in ancient Persia, modern-day Iran. Coincidence? Wait until you hear what happened next. 14 days later, Israeli F-35 fighter jets launched Operation Rising Lion, striking Iranian nuclear facilities with surgical precision. The nation prophesied 2,500 years ago to attack Israel. Persia had been building weapons, capable of fulfilling the ancient threat to wipe the Jewish state from existence. The timing seemed impossible to ignore. But that first blood moon was merely the opening act in a sequence of 4 celestial phenomena that astronomers and theologians alike are calling unprecedented. On September 7, 2025, a second blood moon appeared, this time over Europe, Asia, Africa, and Australia, lasting 82 minutes and arriving just 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year. We're in the middle of 4 significant celestial signs that could hold a prophetic message for Israel. CBN News. And here's where it becomes impossible to dismiss as random chance. The third blood moon is scheduled to appear on March 3, 2026, once again on Purim, visible from Asia to parts of North America for nearly 6 hours. Another blood moon arrived Sunday at midpoint of 4 celestial signs that could have prophetic impact. CBN News. The mathematical probability of 2 total lunar eclipses falling on the same Jewish holiday within a single year defies standard astronomical odds. But when you factor in what's happening on the ground in Israel, in the ancient lands of Babylon, and across the Middle East, the pattern becomes undeniable. Let me take you back 2,500 years to understand why these celestial signs matter so profoundly. In 593 BCE, a Jewish priest named Ezekiel sat by the Kibar River in Babylon, exiled from his homeland after the Babylonian conquest of Jerusalem. The temple where his ancestors had worshipped for centuries lay in ruins. The Jewish people were scattered, enslaved, seemingly finished as a nation. In this moment of absolute despair, Ezekiel received visions that would prove to be among the most precise and verifiable prophecies in human history. But Ezekiel wasn't alone in seeing the future. Around the same time, another Jewish prophet named Joel received a vision that would echo through millennia. Joel 2:31 states, "The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord." Joel 2:31, "The sun will be turned to darkness and the moon to blood before the coming of the great and awesome day of the Lord." This wasn't poetry. This wasn't metaphor. This was a specific, verifiable prediction about celestial events that would signal a turning point in human history. The Apostle Peter, standing in Jerusalem on the day of Pentecost, just weeks after the resurrection of Jesus, quoted this exact prophecy to a crowd of thousands. The book of Revelation chapter 6 verse 12 reinforces it. "And I beheld, when he had opened the 6th seal, and lo, there was a great earthquake, and the sun became black as sackcloth of hair, and the moon became as blood." Another blood moon arrives Sunday at midpoint of 4 celestial signs that could have prophetic impact. CBN News. For centuries, skeptics dismissed these passages as ancient superstition, the ramblings of religious zealots trying to frighten their followers into submission. But modern astronomy has proven that blood moons are real, observable phenomena that occur when Earth passes directly between the sun and moon during a total lunar eclipse. The planet's shadow doesn't completely block the moon, but filters sunlight through Earth's atmosphere, bending red wavelengths onto the lunar surface while shorter blue wavelengths scatter away. The result is a moon that glows deep crimson, appearing to bleed in the night sky. What makes the current sequence extraordinary isn't just the blood moons themselves. It's their precision timing with Jewish feast days, their correlation with unprecedented geopolitical developments in Israel, and their alignment with archaeological discoveries that are confirming biblical accounts with stunning accuracy. In August 2025, Dr. Scott Stripling and his archaeological team working at the biblical site of Shiloh announced a discovery that sent shockwaves through the academic world. They unearthed a monumental building from the Iron Age I period that matches the exact biblical dimensions of the ancient tabernacle. The structure's east-to-west orientation and 2.1 room ratio align perfectly with the description in Exodus 26. Even more remarkable, excavations uncovered more than 100,000 animal bones, primarily from the right side, consistent with Levitical priestly offerings described in the Torah prophecy unfolding. Temple Mount worship and biblical discoveries align. Charisma Magazine Online. 2. Understand the significance. You need to know that Shiloh was where the Ark of the Covenant rested for over 300 years before being moved to Jerusalem. This was the spiritual center of ancient Israel, the place where Hannah prayed for a son and received Samuel, who would become one of Israel's greatest prophets. For archaeologists to find not just any ancient building, but one matching the precise specifications given in Exodus, with physical evidence of the exact type of sacrifices described in Leviticus, is statistically extraordinary. The same week this discovery was announced, thousands of Jews ascended the Temple Mount during Tisha B'Av, the day of mourning for the destruction of the first and second temples. Israeli National Security Minister Itamar Ben-Gvir joined them, marking an unprecedented level of Jewish worship at the site that has been under Islamic control since 691 CE. Prophecy unfolding. Temple Mount worship and biblical discoveries align. Charisma Magazine Online. This wasn't a small prayer gathering. This was thousands of Jews openly worshipping at the most contested religious site on earth, a location that has sparked wars and international incidents for decades. The Al-Aqsa Mosque sits on the Temple Mount, and any change in the status quo typically triggers immediate international response. Yet here were thousands of Jews, including government ministers, ascending the Mount during one of the most sacred days in the Jewish calendar. Think about the timing. Archaeological evidence of ancient Jewish worship practices surfacing at Shiloh, increased Jewish prayer at the Temple Mount, blood moons falling on Jewish feast days, and Iran, ancient Persia, developing nuclear weapons while its leaders publicly call for Israel's destruction. The pieces aren't scattered randomly across the board. They're forming a pattern that matches a 2,600-year-old prophecy with disturbing precision. Let me walk you through Ezekiel's prophecy in detail, because understanding what was predicted makes recognizing the current fulfillment impossible to ignore. In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, written around 593 BCE, while the Jews were captive in Babylon, the prophet describes a future invasion of Israel by a massive coalition of nations. But here's what's remarkable. Ezekiel doesn't describe Israel as it was in his day, a destroyed kingdom with its people scattered in exile. He describes Israel as a restored nation, gathered back to its land, living in security and prosperity. For 2,500 years, this prophecy seemed impossible. How could Israel be restored when the Jewish people were scattered across the Roman Empire, then medieval Europe, then the entire world? How could they return to a land that had been conquered and reconquered by Babylonians, Persians, Greeks, Romans, Byzantines, Arabs, Crusaders, Mamluks, and Ottomans? Yet, on May 14, 1948, exactly as Ezekiel prophesied, Israel was reborn as a nation. Jews began returning from over 100 Countries, speaking dozens of languages, reuniting in the land their ancestors had left 2 millennia earlier. The fig tree, Jesus' metaphor for Israel, bloomed again after centuries of winter. But Ezekiel's prophecy doesn't stop with Israel's restoration. He describes what happens next. Ezekiel 38.5 specifically names Persia, modern-day Iran, as one of the key participants in a future invasion of Israel. Ezekiel 38 AMP, Prophecy about Gog and Future Invasion of Israel, Bible Project. He also names other nations that would join this coalition. The prophecy describes Gog as the leader of Magog, identified by many scholars as representing the region of modern Ukraine and western Russia, along with Meshech and Tubal, believed to be Turkey, and other allies, including Put, which is Libya, Cush, which is Sudan and Ethiopia, and Gomer, which some identify with portions of Germany or Eastern Europe. The War of Gog and Magog, Ezekiel 38:39, Carl Joseph Ministries. For most of history, this prophecy seemed geopolitically impossible. How could these distant nations, separated by thousands of miles, completely different cultures, opposing ideologies, and no shared interests, ever unite against tiny Israel? Russia was Christian Orthodox, then communist atheist. Iran was Muslim. They were natural enemies. Turkey was part of NATO, allied with the West. Libya and Sudan were too weak and fractured to matter on the global stage. But look at today's alliances and watch how impossible becomes inevitable. Russia, Iran, and Turkey have formed an unprecedented military partnership. Russia has established a permanent military presence in Syria, directly north of Israel, achieving for the first time in history the warm-water Mediterranean port it has sought for centuries at Tartus, where we are today. In the prophetic fulfillment of all prophecies of the last days, Robert Clifton Robinson. Let that sink in. For 300 years, Russian czars and Soviet premiers dreamed of a warm water, a port in the Mediterranean. They fought wars, made alliances, and spent billions pursuing this strategic goal. And in 2015, as Syria's government collapsed, Russia finally achieved it by propping up Bashar al-Assad's regime. Now, Russian warships, submarines, and aircraft operate from Syrian bases located directly north of Israel, exactly as Ezekiel described the invasion route 2,600 years ago. The prophetic geography is no longer theoretical, it's operational. Turkey, once Israel's closest Muslim ally, has transformed under Erdogan's leadership into an increasingly hostile Islamic power. Turkey now cooperates militarily with both Russia and Iran, despite being a NATO member. The impossible alliance Ezekiel described is functioning right now. And Iran? On June 13, 2025, Israel launched Operation Rising Lion, striking dozens of Iranian nuclear and missile facilities with approximately 200 jets, explosive-laden drones, and Mossad sabotage teams. Their primary target was the Natanz enrichment site, buried deep underground and supposedly impenetrable. Several key facilities were destroyed, and reports confirmed that IRGC commanders and nuclear scientists were killed in Israel's attack on Iran. A Bible prophecy update. The operation used some of the most advanced military technology on Earth. Israeli F-35 stealth fighters, virtually invisible to radar, penetrated Iranian airspace. Cyber warfare units disabled air defense systems. Special forces teams sabotaged facilities from within. And the United States provided intelligence support and reportedly conducted its own strikes using B-2 stealth bombers carrying GBU-57 massive ordnance penetrator bombs, 30,000-pound weapons specifically designed to destroy deep underground bunkers. Iran responded with approximately 100 drones aimed at Israeli territory, though most were intercepted by Israel's Iron Dome and Arrow defense systems. But here's what's critical to understand. The strike didn't eliminate Iran's nuclear program. It set it back, damaged key facilities, killed important personnel, But Iran's nuclear ambitions, its determination to develop weapons capable of destroying Israel, remain unchanged. This wasn't just another Middle East skirmish. This was Israel striking preemptively against the very nation that Ezekiel, 2,600 years ago, prophesied would lead an invasion against the Jewish state in the latter days. And it happened between the first and second blood moons, during a sequence of celestial signs that ancient prophets said would mark the beginning of the end times. But there's something else happening that most people aren't connecting to the prophecy, something that explains why the Temple Mount has become such a flashpoint. Stripling's team at Shiloh believes they may have identified the gate where Eli the high priest died in 1 Samuel 4 after hearing the Ark of the Covenant had been captured. The finds provide a tangible connection to Israel's worship history and the Ark's significance as the earthly dwelling of God's presence. Prophecy unfolding, Temple Mount worship and biblical discoveries align. Charisma magazine, online. Why does this matter? Because Ezekiel's prophecy doesn't end with the invasion and God's supernatural defense of Israel. Chapters 40 through 48 of Ezekiel describe in meticulous detail a future temple, complete with measurements, architecture, and worship practices. This isn't the second temple that existed in Jesus' time and was destroyed by Rome in 70 CE. This is a different structure, a future temple that will exist during the period Ezekiel calls the restoration of Israel. The archaeological discoveries at Shiloh, the increased focus on the Temple Mount, the political movements toward temple reconstruction, and even the training of Levitical priests for temple service are all parts of this larger prophetic sequence. There are organizations in Israel right now, like the Temple Institute, that have recreated all the implements needed for temple worship according to biblical specifications. They've woven priestly garments, forged silver trumpets, constructed the altar of incense, even bred red heifers required for purification rituals. These aren't theoretical exercises. These are practical preparations for an event that biblical prophecy says will happen: the building of a third temple in Jerusalem. In July 2024, researchers announced the discovery of a massive moat that was used to fortify the Temple Mount and the King's Palace in biblical-era Jerusalem. This moat, carved from solid bedrock, split the city of David in half, separating the palace and Temple Mount from the rest of the city. The Israel Antiquities Authority stated that the creation of this moat was a large-scale, monumental operation designed to demonstrate the power of Jerusalem's rulers to those who entered its gates. Solving mystery, archaeologists find vast moat that protected Jerusalem's biblical kings, the times of Israel. The discovery corresponds precisely to references in 1 Kings 11:27, where King Solomon is described as building the Millo and closing the breach in the wall of the city of David his father. For 150 years, archaeologists searched for this fortification system. Multiple excavations failed to locate it. British archaeologist Kathleen Kenyon excavated in the 1960s and came close but didn't recognize what she'd found. Now, re-examining her notes and conducting new digs, researchers have definitively identified the moat. Solomon built 3,000 years ago. These aren't vague, ambiguous discoveries that scholars are stretching to fit prophecy. These are specific, datable, verifiable archaeological findings that match the biblical text with precision that would have been impossible to fabricate. And there's more. A beautiful 2,700-year-old stone seal was unearthed in excavations in the Davidson Archaeological Garden near the southern wall of the Temple Mount. The black stone seal depicts a winged figure and bears the Paleo-Hebrew inscription Leyehoezer ben Hoshayahu. It has a hole drilled through it from top to bottom so that it could be attached to a chain and worn around one's neck. Top 10 discoveries in biblical archaeology in 2024. Bible Archaeology Report. This seal dates to the First Temple period, the era of Kings Hezekiah and Josiah, when Jerusalem was at its zenith before the Babylonian conquest. Finding personal seals from this period is rare. Finding them near the Temple Mount, inscribed with Hebrew names, provides direct physical evidence that the biblical accounts of this period are historically accurate. Christian leaders who study biblical prophecy, like Pastor John Hagee and Pastor Mark Biltz, have contended for years that blood moons portend significant events for Israel and the Middle East, and therefore the entire world. Another blood moon arrived Sunday at midpoint of 4 celestial signs that could have prophetic impact, CBN News. Hagee's book, 4 Blood Moons, documented a previous tetrad, a series of 4 blood moons occurring on Jewish feast days between 2014 and 2015 that coincided with major events in Jewish history. But here's what makes the current sequence different from previous blood moon tetrads. The 1949 to 1950 tetrad occurred after Israel's re-establishment as a nation, serving as a confirmation. The 1967-1968 tetrad occurred after the Six-Day War, when Israel recaptured Jerusalem, again a retrospective sign. Even the 2014-2015 tetrad followed various Israeli military operations. The current sequence is different. These blood moons are occurring simultaneously with unfolding events, suggesting these aren't retrospective confirmations, but real-time warnings. The first blood moon on March 14, 2025, fell on Purim, the celebration of Israel's deliverance from Persian annihilation. Within 2 weeks, Israel struck Iran's nuclear facilities. The symbolism was so precise, it seemed choreographed by intelligence that transcends human planning. According to Jewish teachings from the Talmud, lunar and solar eclipses have long been seen as signs from God. The Talmud states, "Our rabbis taught, when the sun is in eclipse, it is a bad omen for idolaters. When the moon is in eclipse, it is a bad omen for Israel, since Israel reckons by the moon and idolaters by the sun. If it is in eclipse in the east, it is a bad omen for those who dwell in the east. If in the west, it is a bad omen for those who dwell in the west. If in the midst of heaven, it is a bad omen for the whole world." Another blood moon arrives, Sunday at midpoint of 4 celestial signs that could have prophetic impact, CBN News. The blood moons are appearing as warnings specifically calibrated to the Hebrew calendar, falling on feast days that commemorate historical moments when Israel faced existential threats and experienced divine deliverance. Purim celebrates Esther's intervention that saved the Jews from Haman's genocide plot in ancient Persia. That, modern Iran, the successor state to ancient Persia, is once again threatening Israel's existence as these blood moons appear on Purim, creates a historical parallel that defies coincidence. The second blood moon appeared on September 7, 2025, just 2 weeks before Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, which is also called the Feast of Trumpets. This feast has always been associated in Jewish and Christian eschatology with the announcement of God's judgment, the sounding of the shofar that signals a time of testing and decision. And there's a 4th celestial sign coming that completes the sequence. After the 3 blood moons, there will be a total solar eclipse in August 2026, visible across Europe and Russia. Another blood moon arrived Sunday at midpoint of 4 celestial signs that could have prophetic impact, CBN News. This caps the blood moons with a major solar event that will darken the sun over the very regions Ezekiel identified as the primary sources of the invasion coalition. Think about the prophetic precision of this. 3 lunar eclipses, warnings to Israel. 1 solar eclipse, a warning to the nations that will attack Israel. The eclipses are separated by roughly 6 months, spanning a period of 18 months total. And they're occurring during a period when Israel is more isolated internationally, more threatened militarily, and more focused on temple restoration than at any time since the Roman destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE. Now let me show you something that connects all of this in a way that's both beautiful and terrifying. In Matthew 24, Jesus' disciples asked him what signs would indicate his return and the end of the age. Jesus gave them a list: wars and rumors of wars, famines, earthquakes, persecution of believers, false prophets, lawlessness increasing, the gospel preached to all nations. Then he said something specific about celestial signs. Luke 21:25-28 records Jesus saying, "And there will be signs in sun and moon and stars, and on the earth, distress of nations in perplexity because of the roaring of the sea and the waves, people fainting with fear and with foreboding of what is coming on the world. For the powers of the heavens will be shaken. And then they will see the Son of Man coming in a cloud with power and great glory. Now when these things begin to take place, straighten up and raise your heads, because your redemption is drawing near." Is that not an exact description of our current moment? Nations in perplexity, uncertain. How to respond to rising authoritarianism, nuclear proliferation, climate disruption, pandemic threats, economic instability, people fainting with fear about what's coming, anxiety and depression at record levels globally, and signs in the sun, moon and stars appearing precisely when these conditions exist on Earth. The convergence is so precise that even secular analysts are taking notice. Some prophecy watchers have identified a 2,550-day framework connecting the Feast of Trumpets on September 22nd, 2025, to the Day of Atonement on September 15th, 2032. This represents exactly 7 biblical years, the period Daniel's prophecy associates with the final week of years before Messiah's kingdom. The alignment between these specific fall feasts is extraordinarily rare due to the complex lunar-solar nature of the Hebrew calendar, the 2025 prophetic tapestry, Chuck von Wallace. Whether this specific date setting is accurate remains to be seen. The Bible is clear that no one knows the day or hour. But what's undeniable is that multiple independent indicators are converging. Celestial signs matching biblical prophecy, archaeological discoveries confirming biblical accounts, geopolitical alliances forming exactly as Ezekiel described, Israel striking Iran between blood moons, Temple Mount access increasing, ancient worship sites being excavated, modern Israel existing at all after 2,000 years of exile. The pattern is either the most elaborate coincidence in human history, or we're witnessing the unfolding of events that were set in motion before the foundations of the world were laid. Here's what happens next according to Ezekiel, and this is where the prophecy becomes specific enough to either be proven true or false in the coming years. The invasion coalition led by Gog from the north will advance against Israel. Ezekiel 38:11 describes their reasoning. You will say, Israel is an unprotected land filled with unwalled villages. I will march against her and destroy these people who live in such confidence. The invaders will see Israel as vulnerable, an easy target despite its military strength. They'll believe the time is right to finally accomplish what every enemy of Israel has attempted, the complete destruction of the Jewish state. The armies will gather, the nations will march, and the world will watch what appears to be Israel's final moments. But the outcome isn't determined by military might or numerical superiority. Ezekiel 38:18-23 describes God's direct intervention. In that day, when Gog attacks the land of Israel, my fury will rise in my anger. In my zeal and fiery wrath, I declare that at that time there shall be a great earthquake in the land of Israel. The fish in the sea, the birds in the sky, the beasts of the field, every creature that moves along the ground, and all the people on the face of the earth will tremble at my presence. The mountains will be overturned, the cliffs will crumble, and every wall will fall to the ground. I will summon a sword against Gog on all my mountains. Every man's sword will be against his brother. I will execute judgment on him with plague and bloodshed. I will pour down torrents of rain, hailstones and burning sulfur on him and on his troops and on the many nations with him. And so I will show my greatness and my holiness, and I will make myself known in the sight of many nations. Then they will know that I am the Lord. The invading armies will turn on each other in confusion. Natural disasters will devastate their forces. And the result, according to Ezekiel 39:21-22, is that the nations will see my judgment which I have executed, and my hand which I have laid on them. So the house of Israel shall know that I am the Lord their God from that day forward. Ezekiel even provides specific details about the aftermath. It will take 7 months to bury the dead. The weapons will provide fuel for 7 years. The magnitude of the destruction will be so complete that the entire world will recognize this wasn't a military victory but divine intervention. We're not talking about some distant theoretical future. We're talking about a sequence of events where the celestial signs are already appearing, the geopolitical pieces are already positioned, and the historical countdown has already begun. The blood moons aren't random. They're precisely timed markers in a prophetic sequence that spans millennia but is culminating in our generation. The archaeological discoveries aren't coincidental. They're physical confirmations that the biblical accounts were accurate historical records, lending credibility to the prophetic portions that describe our future. And the political and military developments in the Middle East aren't chaotic. They're following a pattern laid out with specificity that would have been impossible to predict through human knowledge alone. Consider the odds. What are the chances that lunar eclipses would fall on the exact same Jewish holiday twice in 1 year? Astronomical calculations show this is extremely rare. What are the chances that those eclipses would occur during a period when Israel strikes Iran's nuclear facilities, when archaeological discoveries confirm biblical worship sites, when Russia establishes a permanent presence north of Israel, when Turkey shifts from ally to adversary, when temple restoration movements gain unprecedented political support? Each individual element has its own probability. But when you multiply the probabilities of all these elements occurring simultaneously, the number becomes so astronomically small that you're forced to conclude either we're living through the most improbable sequence of coincidences ever recorded, or there's an intelligence orchestrating events according to a predetermined plan. The question isn't whether these signs are significant. The question is whether we're paying attention. The third blood moon will appear on March 3, 2026, once again on Purim, the feast celebrating Israel's deliverance from a Persian plot to annihilate them. The symbolism is so precise, it seems deliberately orchestrated. And perhaps it is. Perhaps the same intelligence that knew Earth would cast blood-red shadows on its moon during specific Jewish feast days also knew that Iran, modern Persia, would emerge as Israel's primary existential threat at precisely this moment in history. The heavens are declaring something. The Earth is responding. And whether humanity recognizes it or not, we're living through a period that future generations will study as the moment when ancient prophecy transitioned from promise to fulfillment. But here's what should concern everyone watching these events unfold. The prophecies don't end with Israel's supernatural defense. They continue into a period that biblical texts describe as unprecedented tribulation, a time of testing for the entire world. Jesus said in Matthew 24:21, "For then there will be great tribulation, such as has not been from the beginning of the world until now, no, and never will be." The sequence goes: Israel restored, invasion threatened, divine intervention, temple rebuilt, global leader emerges promising peace, covenant signed with Israel, peace broken, tribulation begins. This isn't random speculation. This is the consistent pattern described across multiple biblical books written by different authors over a 1,000-year period. And every single prerequisite for this sequence is either already fulfilled or currently in process. Israel restored? Check. Invasion coalition forming? Check. Temple movement active? Check. Global instability increasing? Check. Celestial signs appearing? Check. The signs are in the heavens. The evidence is on the ground. The prophecy is unfolding. The only question remaining is, what will you do with this information? Because if these signs mean what they appear to mean, the transformation coming to our world won't be subtle. It will be undeniable. It will be global, and it will be permanent. The blood moons are counting down to something. The archaeological discoveries are confirming the reliability of the source documents. The geopolitical alignments are matching ancient predictions with precision that transcends human capability. And time, that constant forward march we've always taken for granted, is accelerating toward a destination that was marked on heaven's calendar before time began. You're not watching random current events. You're watching prophecy become history. You're witnessing the setup for events that will reshape human civilization. And the choice before you is the same choice humanity has always faced: recognize the signs and respond, or dismiss them and be unprepared for what comes next. The final blood moon of this sequence appears in just months. The solar eclipse over Russia and Europe follows soon after. The window is narrowing. The signs are intensifying, and the ancient prophecies that seemed impossible for millennia are proving to be precisely accurate descriptions of our present reality. The question isn't whether something significant is happening. The question is whether you're ready for what happens next.